They told you to forgive, to be the bigger person, to let it go even while you were the one still losing sleep. But deep down, you know something is wrong. Why does it still ache after you said you moved on? Why does forgiveness feel less like freedom and more like erasing yourself? This is not just about betrayal. It is about the hidden damage it leaves behind. The kind that rewires your trust, bends your instincts, and makes you question whether you are the problem. And here is where philosophy collides with your reality. Nietzsche once warned that moral systems were not created to empower individuals, but to preserve the herd. And when forgiveness is demanded too soon, it is not healing. It is control. They did not just betray you. They reshaped how you see people, how you see love, how you see yourself. And the cruelest part, they expected to stay to be accepted back as if nothing happened. This is the kind of pain that makes you feel like the villain for protecting yourself. You are told forgiveness is for you, not them. That you will feel lighter once you let go. But no one speaks about the cost of letting go before you are ready. Maybe they said sorry. Or maybe they stayed silent long enough for time to be mistaken as resolution. But inside you the wound remained, because nothing felt complete. You did not get justice. You got pressure. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you forgive too soon, you bury the wound unconscious. You pretend you are healed, but inside the ache remains, directing your choices, making you smaller. And that is not strength. That is submission. Where did you learn that being good meant endless forgiveness? Was it religion? Culture? The voices that told you love meant sacrifice? Somewhere along the way, you were trained to place other people's comfort above your own clarity, to make peace with those who brought war to your doorstep, to confuse self-erasure with virtue. Nietzsche described this as slave morality, a value system that teaches you to feel guilty for saying no, to doubt yourself for drawing boundaries, to see kindness only in submission. Real forgiveness, he argued, is not something you give to avoid conflict. It is something you might offer only after deep understanding, and only if it does not destroy your dignity. If forgiveness costs your self-respect, it is not peace. It is performance. Here is what few will admit. Forgiving too quickly does not stop the pain. It buries it. And when the betrayal returns, and it often does, the wound cuts even deeper, because now the betrayal is not just theirs. It is yours. You are the one who ignored your instincts. You are the one who opened the door again. You are the one who kept hoping they would change. Nietzsche would ask, who taught you that letting someone stay is more important than letting yourself grow? Forgiveness is not the destination. The destination is self-trust. Healing is not about letting them off the hook. It is about taking yourself off the hook. Some wounds are not meant to be erased. They are meant to be honored. Understood. Jung believed that wholeness requires integrating the shadow, not pretending it never existed. And your pain is not a sign you failed to forgive. It is a sign you finally see clearly, because pretending you are fine does not move you forward. It only makes you lose yourself quietly. Nietzsche was not against healing. He was against pretending. He saw how guilt was dressed as virtue, how silence was mistaken for peace, how obedience was rewarded while truth was punished. And he warned us, forgiveness given out of fear is not forgiveness at all. If you have been carrying guilt for holding boundaries, hear this. You were not weak for feeling hurt. You were not bitter for remembering. You were not wrong for needing more than an apology. You were simply human. And being human is not a flaw. It is your truth. Forgiveness, then, is not something you owe. It is not proof that you are good. It is not evidence of strength. It is a choice. One you may never give. And that does not make you less. It makes you free. You told yourself you forgave them because it was the right thing to do. But deep down, you know you forgave because you felt guilty not to. Guilty for being angry. Guilty for cutting someone off. Guilty for protecting your own peace. Where does that guilt come from? It is not logic. It is not justice. It is programming. A system designed by culture, family, and belief to make you doubt your instincts. The world trains you, especially if you are sensitive, to feel bad for choosing yourself. Nietzsche warned us that guilt is rarely natural. It is manufactured. It is a leash used by the weak to restrain the strong, a weight placed on hearts that would otherwise rise. And the stronger your heart, the more guilt is used to bend it. Ask yourself this: who benefits when you forgive too soon? Who wins when you say, "It's okay," even when it is not? Usually not you. It is them, the betrayer, the manipulator, the authority figure, the partner who refuses to grow. Your forgiveness becomes their shelter. Your silence becomes their permission. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Guilt is the obstacle to that acceptance. It convinces you that self-protection is selfish, that saying no makes you cruel, that boundaries make you cold. But this is the lie. Self-protection is not cruelty. It is clarity, and clarity is the beginning of freedom. Look at the structures around you: family, religion, society. Who is celebrated? The one who keeps the peace, the one who swallows the pain, the one who forgives without question. And who is punished? The one who names the truth, the one who walks away, the one who refuses to pretend. Nietzsche called this an inversion of values, where strength is labeled evil and submission is praised as holy. And this is exactly what happens when you are shamed for not forgiving fast enough. You become the villain for having boundaries. You become bitter for remembering. You become cold for protecting your own soul. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if your refusal to forgive quickly is not weakness but wisdom? What if your anger is not cruelty but clarity? What if your pain is not a failure but a sign you are finally awake? Jung reminded us that healing is not found in pretending. It is found in integration, and integration begins with honesty. Honesty about what hurt. Honesty about what changed. Honesty about what you will never allow again. The reality is this: guilt has been used to turn self-respect into sin. It has been used to make you betray yourself every time someone else feels uncomfortable. It has been used to keep you small, quiet, and available to those who profit from your silence. But once you see it clearly, you no longer need to carry it. You can set it down. You can breathe without apology. You can walk away without explanation. Because your boundaries are not cruelty. They are survival. They are truth. Nietzsche asked us to stop confusing submission with virtue. He challenged us to see guilt not as moral authority but as a tool of control. And Jung pointed to the deeper work: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is how you make it conscious: by naming guilt for what it is. Not morality, not love, but programming. And when you finally understand that, you stop feeling bad for protecting yourself. You stop apologizing for your clarity. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Because the truth is simple. Forgiveness is not something you owe. Peace is not something you must purchase with silence. And guilt is not a debt you need to keep paying. You are not cruel for saying no. You are not cold for walking away. You are not selfish for choosing your own peace. You are simply awake. There is an unspoken agreement that forms after betrayal. You tolerate. They pretend. You both play your roles. And as long as the cycle continues, no one has to face the truth. They do not have to change. You do not have to be alone. On the surface, it looks like resolution, but in reality, it is a shadow contract, a cycle that keeps you stuck, not because you are weak, but because you have been taught that love means endurance, that staying means loyalty, that leaving means failure. Nietzsche was ruthless about cycles like these. He believed most people live in self-deception, not because they are ignorant but because they are afraid. Afraid of the silence that comes with boundaries. Afraid of the loneliness that comes with walking away. Afraid of being judged as hard instead of loving. And so they stay. They abandon themselves to preserve an illusion. And in doing so, they become invisible even to themselves. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But cycles like these are built to stop that acceptance. They train you to tolerate, to forgive, to adapt, while burying the parts of you that long for truth. The cost is your wholeness. The cost is your soul. Here is something dark. People who hurt you often rely on your inability to fully walk away. They know how deeply you crave connection. They know how guilt eats at you. They know what words to say to stop the bleeding without ever cleaning the wound. They do not need to be malicious. They just need to be self-centered. And Nietzsche would argue it is not their selfishness that traps you. It is your unwillingness to be seen as selfish. Because you have been taught to confuse self-protection with cruelty, to see boundaries as betrayal, to believe that saying no makes you less loving. But this is the lie. Self-protection is not betrayal. It is clarity. And clarity is where freedom begins. So let us not shame the version of you that stayed. You forgave because you hoped they would grow. You stayed quiet because you hoped they would finally see. You softened because you did not want to lose them. That was not failure. That was your heart speaking. But now your soul is louder. And it is no longer asking for more chances. It is asking for truth. Nietzsche spoke of the inversion of values, where strength becomes evil and submission becomes holy. That is what happens when you are made to feel guilty for leaving. You are painted as bitter for remembering. You are painted as cold for walking away. You are painted as selfish for protecting yourself. But what if none of that is true? What if you are simply awake? You did not cause their betrayal. You did not deserve their silence. You did not create the wound. You were honest and you were punished for it. And the deeper punishment was the guilt you carried afterward. Not because of your actions, but because of their expectations. And now you carry it like a debt. But Nietzsche would say your guilt is not a sign of wrongdoing. It is a sign you were trained to betray yourself each time someone else felt discomfort. This is not healing. This is programming. And once you recognize it, you do not need to keep carrying it. You can place it down. You can choose differently. You can decide that silence is no longer your virtue, that clarity is no longer your shame. Jung believed that true growth comes when we integrate what we have avoided. And perhaps the hardest thing to integrate is this: you were never wrong for needing more than an apology. You were never wrong for saying enough. You were never wrong for walking away. The cycle only continues if you return to it. But the moment you choose yourself, the cycle shatters. The shadow contract dissolves. And the silence that once frightened you becomes the space where you finally meet yourself again. There is a certain silence that follows betrayal. A loneliness so sharp it makes even your memories feel like strangers. And just when you begin to rebuild, they return. They come back softer. They say all the words you wished to hear the first time. I've changed. I was scared. I finally understand how much you mean to me. I've done the work. And part of you, the part that still remembers the sweetness, listens. Not because you are naive, but because you are human. Because your heart remembers the warmth even while your mind remembers the wound. Redemption feels seductive. feels like closure. It feels like maybe the pain had a purpose. But not every return is real. Not every apology is for you. Nietzsche warned us that words are but symbols for the relations of things. Words are easy. Character is not spoken. It is revealed. And true change does not beg to be noticed. It simply moves differently. So why do they return? Sometimes it is not love. It is reputation management. They cannot stand the image of themselves as the villain. They do not want to be remembered as the one who broke you. So they ask for forgiveness, not to restore you, but to repair their own ego. And modern language has given manipulators sharper tools. They speak of healing, of growth, of shadow work. They name their trauma. They quote the books. They shed practiced tears. And you, being the one with empathy, want to believe it. Because you know how hard real healing is. Because you still crave connection with someone who is finally doing the work. But here is the test. If their new self still demands your old sacrifice, it is not transformation. It is strategy. If they ask for access but offer no accountability, it is not growth. It is theater. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That is the standard. Not their promises, but their patterns. Not their apologies, but their actions. And you do not owe them entry just because they say the right things. You do not need to test your boundaries to prove you have healed. You do not need to reopen the door to show that you have evolved. Sometimes closure is quiet. It does not arrive in a final conversation. It arrives when you no longer need one. The real question is not whether they have changed. The real question is whether you have. Whether the version of you that tolerated crumbs can finally say, "I am no longer starving." Nietzsche was not interested in lies, especially the ones we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. He believed that facing truth, however painful, is the only path to power. So ask yourself honestly, am I letting them back in because they have truly changed? Or because I missed the version of me that existed when things were good? Am I forgiving because I see accountability, or because I am tired of feeling alone? If the answers sting, you are closer to freedom than you think. Remember this: forgiveness is not a reunion. Forgiveness is a release. You can forgive and still block them. You can forgive and still walk away. Because forgiveness is not an open door. It is the moment you realize you no longer need one. Nietzsche would call that the beginning of becoming, not just healed but sovereign. You are no longer the same person they betrayed. You have grown. You have sat in silence. You have walked through pain without applause. You have cried privately, screamed quietly, and still carried on. You stopped begging for validation. You stopped lowering your needs. You stopped shrinking to fit into their version of love. And now you no longer need to prove your forgiveness. Your peace is no longer performative. It is embodied. And that kind of power no one can take from you. No one teaches you how to grieve the future that will never happen. You are not only letting go of a person. You are letting go of the conversations you imagined, the apologies you never received, the healing that never came. You are grieving the version of them they pretended to be. And that grief is heavy. But grief, as Nietzsche believed, is not weakness. It is transformation. He wrote, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." The pain you feel is not pointless. It is carving you open for truth. It is reshaping your soul into something stronger than the person who once tolerated less. Carl Jung reminded us that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. And this is the work now. Not cutting off the memory. Not pretending it never happened. But integrating the lesson into who you are becoming. You are not defined by the betrayal. You are defined by how deeply you have chosen to live beyond it. So ask yourself honestly, am I holding on because they have changed? Or because I still crave the version of me that existed when they were kind? Am I forgiving because I see real accountability? Or because I am tired of feeling alone? These questions sting, but the sting is truth, and truth is the soil of freedom. You can forgive without reunion. You can release without reopening. You can choose peace without asking their permission. Forgiveness is not about letting them back in. It is about letting yourself out of the cycle, out of the guilt, out of the endless waiting for someone who has already shown you who they are. Nietzsche once said, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. This is the price. Letting go of the illusion that they will fix what they broke. Letting go of the fantasy that your pain will be validated by the very person who caused it. Letting go of the idea that closure comes from their words. It comes from your choice. So take a breath. You were never here to be their healer. Not their redemption arc. Not their therapist. You were never meant to prove your goodness by carrying their shame. You do not have to shrink yourself into grace that costs your soul. You do not have to be endlessly forgiving to be worthy of love. True love, whether from another or from yourself, does not demand self-erasure. It does not punish honesty. It does not call your boundaries cruelty. It does not confuse your silence with peace. Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are. And individuation requires a final cut. Not to punish them but to release you. Not to prove anything but to protect your future. So here is the truth. They may never apologize the way you wanted. They may never grow. They may rewrite the story to make you the villain. And still you rise. Not because it did not matter, but because you finally did. Forgiveness, when it comes, will not be about their comfort. It will be about your sovereignty. Your ability to look in the mirror and know you did not abandon yourself. That you chose truth over performance. That you chose peace over approval. That you chose yourself over the cycle. And that choice, Nietzsche would say, is the beginning of becoming. Not just healed, but free.